Joel said, "Oh, we're doing this script, No Country for Old Men." I just read the book. I said, "Well, aren't you going to direct it?" And they said, "Well, we might." I said, "I'll never talk to you again if you don't direct it." 1917.
Blake, let's talk about this for a minute.
Why?
I don't think you should move the camera unless you've got a very important reason for doing so. I mean, 1917, it was really useful because you're telling a story in a very particular way, and it's a real-time story, and you're following basically one character. It worked. It immersed the audience within this story. You know, we had to design basically the shot in our heads and on a diagram before the set could be built, before the trenches could be dug, because everything had to be built to the actual action, the time the action would take, the time that the dialogue would take with two guys walking at a certain speed. And we went to Harry and said, you know, we were going to do this film, so I'd really like to shoot it on the LF, but I can't do it on the studio LF. I mean, it's not as heavy as a 535 maybe, you know, film camera, but it's still kind of too heavy to run on a lightweight gimbal. So we said to Harry, well, if you can't do it, there are some other cameras that we could use. And Harry said, well, oh my, well, we thought about making one, but not for a few years. And I said, well, it's next year. They said, okay, we promise you we can get you 2 prototypes. It was a trick that I'd done on Jarhead, actually leaving a set of lights in shot and then just replacing those lights with a fire element. The night scenes under the oil fires, we basically shot them on stage at Universal. We had the 2 big stages with a door open in the middle and basically filled it with kind of sand dunes. And I lit that entirely with household bulbs. You get them at Home Depot. And I had them on, you know, chasing dimmers, and so they gave a sort of flicker. So when we came to do 1917 and the burning church, I thought, well, okay, I need to light 360, but this time I need to light a huge space because Schofield's journey is enormous, really, running. That's quite a long sort of old trip. And there were very specific places where the light needed to be. So I figured to make the biggest pile of lights I've ever done. I could just sort of balance each light in this huge rig and, you know, punch it out a little bit where I needed a bit more of a hot spot or soften it all down. It was really very controlled. Prisoners.
Tell me, goddammit. Tell me where they are. Tell me! Tell me! Tell me!
That was the first film I did with Denny, and I think some of it we storyboarded, but I know Denny and I spent quite a while talking through the script, talking about concepts and ideas and just the feel of the thing, which that sort of period I think is invaluable, and I love it. You know, Denny calls it the one time you can dream, because as soon as you get to the production, then reality hits and everything's compromised. I mean, whatever you think of anything you've ever done, you look at it and you know it's a compromise. The trick was to get the rain and to get the rig on the car and to get the town where they're driving through the town and get the number of vehicles, not only stunt vehicles, but actually just local people to turn up with their cars. That was a big effort. That was the last day of shooting, in fact. And it took to the end of the shoot for us, well, I say us, for Denny and I, really to get production to sign off on it, on that number of cars and control that street. Luckily, it was a small town street and it wasn't going to be very busy late at night. I couldn't light it. There's no way you could put lights in it. So I needed the street lights to work, you know, the shops to be lit, to leave the lights on in certain times. And you know, so there's all those things you have to work out. We were both very glad at the end we actually managed to do it, because there was some doubt about it for a while.
We interviewed Paul Dano a few months ago, and he was really gushing about the energy that Team Deakins had, that there was this quiet professionalism
we work very much with the same core people, you know. My first assistant, Andy Harris, I mean, I worked with since doing Fargo on every movie. Like every movie. Mitch Lillian, the key grip, Billy O'Leary, the gaffer I've worked with many, many times since Sid and Nancy. They all know the kind of set I like, which is quiet. And I'm always behind the camera. They know that they have more responsibility because I am at the camera, so they have to be attentive to things that might change rather than having me go and try and find where they are to get something else done, you know. So it's a very, very tight group of people. It's nice to hear somebody like Paul Dano say that. I think one of the cinematographer's main responsibilities is to create a set that it's inviting. It's a safe place for an actor to do what they have to do, because if you didn't have the performance, you wouldn't have anything in most films. You owe it to them, really, and I think that's really important. I mean, I'm kind of a nervous person, especially on a movie set. But as nervous as I am, you've got to understand, and actors are as well, and they're the ones kind of putting themselves on the line on the screen, really. Shawshank Redemption.
Because if you do trust her, there's no reason you can't keep that 35,000.
What did you say?
35,000.
35,000.
All of it.
All of it?
Every penny.
You better start making sense.
If you want to keep all that money, give it to your wife.
I was at the American Society of Cinematographers Clubhouse one time, and there was some of my heroes there, this obviously was years ago, talking about this film and saying, yeah, it was really well shot, but, you know, it's much easier when you just use natural light. They didn't realize, but I mean, the whole cell block is a set that's built inside a warehouse. Yeah, we shot in a real prison, but only the exteriors, and the mess hall was a real prison, and some corridors. And to do that, I had to have every HMI that my gaffer Bill O'Leary could get hold of in the States, we had in Mansfield, lighting that location for daylight, because we were shooting a 12-hour day. You could maybe shoot 2 or 3 hours with natural light in some of those rooms, but you'd have to make sure it was a nice day. You don't want to over-dramatize it. I mean, the shot of Tim when he escapes and he's standing looking up the heavens with his arms out in the rain, I mean, that's as dramatic as it gets. Maybe that's a little too dramatic as well. But so there was a huge amount of lighting in it, and I thought it was kind of flattering when they said they didn't feel there was any lighting involved. Sicario. Well, that was like, okay, so it's getting dark, so how are they going to see and how are we going to see? How's the audience going to see? When I read the script, I said to Denny, well, it's all very well, but if you want the audience to see anything, that's going to be a cheat. And then he said, well, what if everything is seen through their assisted vision? And I said, okay, well, I've done night vision enough. I did it in a film called Courage Under Fire, quite a lot of it. But the problem is then, how do you differentiate between the characters' points of view? And he said, yeah, it'll be all right. We need 2 different systems. My wife and I, James and I, we kind of were doing research on this and found this company called FLIR, who were doing kind of high-end infrared imagery. And they lent us a camera that we could experiment with. So you get a very different image like that from, you know, what is basically a heat sensor, as opposed to something that is an image intensifier that is actually just taking the starlight or whatever and just pulling the hell out of it. One shot we shot during the test, which was following somebody as they were going down the steps into the tunnel. A prop guy heated up the soles of their shoes, so they're really hot. So at the beginning of the shot, they're walking, and it's like really, you see these footprints really bright. And by the time they get to the bottom of the stairs, it's faded away. I thought it was a really interesting trick. There's a shot in the film like that, but it's never held long enough that you see the footprints disappear. My favorite scene in the film probably is in the kitchen. It's just a simple 2-hander between Emily and Benicio.
I need you to sign this piece of paper. It basically says that everything we did was done by the book.
Originally, that was like a few pages of dialogue. Benicio said, do we really need this? They had a long, long rehearsal time. stripping it down to the bare essentials. And I thought that was just fantastic. I really enjoyed that. At the end of all this, all the rest of the stuff that's gone on, you get to that point and it's like, okay, but I thought it was really good. Big Lebowski.
Yeah, oh yeah, what condition my condition was in.
Yeah, it was very much Joel and Ethan, you know, their idea. I mean, we talked it through. I mean, we talk about little things about how you do the stars in the backing, you know, which I did it all with like 3M front projection material and cut it up, stuff like that. You know, I remember when the wardrobe was designed and they got these big kind of bowling kind of hat things around them. And it was really awkward, but actually was kind of interesting the way they worked and everything, you know. And then you find a way of tracking down the bowling alley. And one time we used this little remote car with a camera rigged on it. But another time, Bruce Hammy, my dolly grip, said, I'll get a 30-foot pipe, we'll put the camera at the end of it, and I'll just push it down so the shot going under the legs of the girls down there. It's just the camera on a little soft pad, and my dolly grip's got this long metal pipe, and he's just pushing it down the middle. I mean, it's really low tech, but it's kind of fun.
We commit your final mortal remains to the bosom of the Pacific Ocean, which you love so well. Good night, sweet prince.
We were standing down on the hillside down in San Pedro, and and it just happened. It was so windy, they threw the ashes out of the French roast can. French roast, which is something we talked about as being kind of funny. Anyway, the ash comes out and it disappears, which is fine, but I looked around and my assistant was completely covered in them. So was I.
Oh shit, dude, I'm sorry.
I thought I remember things like that. It was kind of funny. I kind of love all those little challenges, yeah. No Country for Old Men.
Call it. Call it, yes. For a whole lot. Just call it. Well, we need to know what we're calling it for here.
You need to call it. I can't call it for you. Well, it wouldn't be fair.
I didn't put nothing up.
Yes, you did. You've been putting it up your whole life. You just didn't know it.
The thing about Joel and Ethan, they love getting into different kind of worlds. You know, they kind of just move around in different genres, don't they? A really interesting way. But they're very prepared, you know, spend a lot of time talking about it, doing drawings, storyboarding, studying locations. You talk about the night sequence going into the river. They were very, very specific locations, and the whole sequence is split up. The trucks are where the drug bust goes wrong is one location, and then running to the river is about a couple of miles away from that. So it was, you know, like any film, it's a sort of jigsaw is how you sort of schedule things. But it was really important for this because it wasn't a huge amount of money. It wasn't a hugely big budget film. One of the things that early on that Joel and Ethan said, when we're shooting this, just be aware we're not going to have any music on it. They knew right at the start, well before we started shooting, the only sound would be natural sounds. So that impacts like, okay, when do you have dust going through, or where do you have kind of grass so you can feel a wind and have the wind noise, and like the peanut wrapper in the gas station, you know, the packet just going. Again, everything's storyboarded in advance, even though sometimes we would change things fairly dramatically on set. My gaffer, Chris Napolitano, and I spent many nights, many days and then nights as well, going to that town and saying where we were going to put lights and how we were going to rig street lamps and which street lamps we didn't want on because it was kind of too flat with them on, and which ones would be the key sources. You know, over, I think it was 2 weeks, they cabled the rooftops and put not a lot of lights, but little lights in very specific places. We knew if we were in the truck looking out the window, those lights had to be on. And then we wanted this shop to stay open, or we wanted to put some fluorescent tubes above the shop. You know, there's still things that happen on the day and you just find, oh, well, that light doesn't work, but I could put one here and that'll be really interesting, you know. It's partly creative and trying to get in the heads of the directors, but get in the heads of the characters as well and reflect the characters and the story going on in front of you. But it's also a technical challenge. So you sort of break it down into all the aspects that you need to deal with. And there's one shot where Tommy Lee goes back to the motel room. He's standing in the doorway and his truck is outside and his shadow's playing on the wall. And it's kind of this fractured kind of shadow, and there's a mirror with another bit of fractured light. You know, usually I don't use two lights. I have two shadows. I mean, because it's not really real, but at this point it just seemed right. And that's how you try and express something that's going on with the character and within the scene. Skyfall.
Who doesn't appreciate the occasional twist, Mr.
Bond. James Bond.
First I heard about Sam doing a Bond movie. He called me up and he said, don't put the phone down, but I'm going to do the next James Bond. And I think I probably said something, why wouldn't I put the phone down? He said, we're just going to approach it. It's just a film. It's nothing to, you know, look at it just as a film like we've done already, Jarhead or Revolutionary Road. And it's a film. It's about a character. It's about an aging spy who's, the world's passing him by. You know, can he still compete? And it's about those sort of things. We weren't making a Bond movie. That's the way I saw it. Probably most of it we shot single camera. You know, I like to operate, so I operated. Certain sequences we had 11 cameras. You do on when you have big stunts in action, but for the most part it was very controlled and very considered and like any other movie. And, you know, if it had been multiple cameras and dozens of units, I wouldn't have taken it. But Sam said, no, we'll concentrate. It's as much a character study as it is an action movie. That's what drew me in. At one point, we discussed about the attack coming off the water. You know, these guys in dinghies at night coming and the forest behind the castle going on fire. But you do that on a real location. I mean, with, you know, the frozen lake is CG in the background. And when the building's on fire, we shot some of it on this location with a brilliantly controlled burn of the set. And then we recreated that in a similar way as doing the church in 1917. We recreated that on stage with a big light bank, which was replaced with elements that we'd shot of the house burning on location. The ice was fake ice. The break in the ice was helped with CG, but we shot underwater shots on a tank. But again, you kind of, you know what the wish list is, and you sort of break it down into what shots you can do. And you know, as much as possible, you do it in camera, you know. Fargo. I think I'm drawn to desolation. It's my still photographs of desolated English seaside or the American West. I'm not very good at shooting crowds. I like lonely people in big spaces, I guess. So Fargo is good for me.
You're the owner here, Mr. Lundegaard?
Nah, executive sales manager.
Well, you can help me. My name's Marge Gunderson.
My father-in-law, he's the owner.
Uh-huh. Well, I'm a police officer from up Brainerd, investigating some malfeasance. And I was just wondering if you'd had any new vehicles stolen off the lot in the past couple of weeks.
We didn't get any snow that year. That was a real frustration. One day we would shoot part of the scene in one location. During the day, the snow would melt, and then we would have to go like another 20 miles north to get another place that could match and shoot there. And we were It was funny. Some of the parking lot shots, it's totally created snow, so the effects team would work all night snowing the airport parking lot and the one outside the main office building.
Can you even name all the movies that you worked on with the Coen brothers?
Barton Fink, Hudsucker, Fargo, Serious Man, Intolerable Cruelty, Big Lebowski. I'm losing track now. Yeah, see? No Country for Old Men. I mean. The assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford.
Open that safe.
You know, I'm very lucky doing a Western like that. It's more like a tone poem in a way. It's a kind of memory. I don't know. If you read the book, a wonderful book, the film's based on it, it's wonderful. It's pure poetry. There are a few existing photographs of Jesse James, especially one at his death in the morgue or whatever. That vignette, it's an old box camera and it's vignetting. And Andrew and I talked about it a lot. And he said, I think that would be a really interesting way to come in and out of sequences and give it a slightly strange sort of distance feel. We got feedback from certain people saying, can you shoot it with a normal lens? Because we don't know about this. We don't like it. So I think we kind of pulled back a little bit. Seeing the final cut, I remember talking to Andrew, and we both said, wish we'd have used it a little more, because there's other places it could have built the transition between sequences, and that's what it was really about.
I wanted to ask, what was in that original 4-hour cut that was unjustly trimmed down?
Well, unjustly, I'm a director. I mean, unjustly. No, I would love to. I did see the longer cut because I saw an edit. We shot a lot of what happened after the film ends. We shot what happens to Frank James, which is really interesting because he had a farm up in Maine or somewhere up there. He used to take tourists around his farm and charge them for looking at his farmhouse and stuff. It's like gangster tourism or whatever, you know what I mean? It's like, I thought that was really interesting. And just in the film, there was more things with Ford before he shot. His relationship with this woman in this town of Creed up in the Rockies, and this woman commits suicide, jumps off a bridge. I mean, it's all true. It's all what actually happened. And I'm a sucker for true stories that are so strange and tell you so much about that period and those characters and that life that they had. I think it's so good, I could have done with the other hour, you know. And it wouldn't have made any more money or lost any more money, so why the hell, you know? Empire of Light. The film, for me, when I first read the script, was very much about a small world, a character who's lonely, but she gets solace and comfort from the friends around her. And most of her friends and most of the people she sees every day are in the cinema. The people that she works with in the cinema, the people that support her, they know her problem and they support her. So for me, the film's about community. It's not about the wonders of movie making, all that rubbish. It's really about this one woman's world, and felt much more of a film that needed to be quiet and sort of observational in a way. And the camera was just kind of observing and allowing the characters to be within the frame.
So when do we, open up?
20 minutes?
What's up there?
Our public art allowed.
Can I have a look?
Oh, I'm not sure.
Go on, please.
The film required a upstairs abandoned ballroom in an abandoned part of the cinema, and that's what Dreamland provided. So we were lucky to find that, really. It was strange because the lobby at Dreamland is kind of very small, and it's got a low ceiling, and it's got no staircase or anything, and the script required something a little bit more. You enter this space and there it is, a lobby and a staircase and the cinema's going off. So the solution we had was actually building a set on a space facing the promenade to marry it with what would be the view out of the location. I used a lot of LEDs. You know, obviously daylight changes, you know, and a lot of the action takes place inside and outside the lobby, but it's actually open to the environment. So I needed some way of being able to control the light level on the inside against the outside, not only in terms of intensity, but also color balance, because at the end of the day, light's getting bluer and all the rest of it. And the other reason was you build them into a set like that, and if you use it, you know, traditional tungsten lights, they get incredibly hot. And that would have been kind of crazy, especially with us shooting in the winter, the glass doors, hot inside, cold outside. That's recipe for a lot of badness. Blade Runner 2049.
Got a name?
Officer KD6-3.
That's not a name. It's a serial number.
All right. Joe.
What do you want, Joe?
I love sci-fi. One of my favorite films is Tarkovsky's Solaris, but I like that kind of sci-fi. I like something that feels kind of real. I don't like science fantasy. But, you know, the approach is different, the kind of color scheme of Blade Runner, the kind of world you're creating. And, you know, if we hold this shot, it's again like Andrei Tarkovsky or Melville or whoever, or Bresson. If we hold this shot a bit longer, maybe it'll mean something else. Maybe the audience go, why are we holding this shot? What's going to happen? You build a tension through the use of the shot, the frame, and just little camera movements. Denny's a master of that. I mean, again, it's all started really with conversations we had in pre-production. And a lot of things just develop. They start as little things and then develop, and then you find how we're going to do it technically. You know, the sequence of the holograms with the Elvis singing, and it's like a futuristic Las Vegas. Maybe it's not futurist. I haven't been to Vegas for a while. Maybe it's like that now. And the idea, it's all kind of gone wrong. So it's kind of this confusion of different people and different ideas. But you figure out how you're going to do it. One of the big things that's about that was actually, well, how are we going to shoot it? We want this big space, but we can't afford the set. So I said, well, just do it in black. And I said, we just put black drapes up around. Couldn't have been cheaper. So we figured out this whole, I figured out, okay, I did, yeah. I figured out this whole rock and roll kind of lighting scheme. I did it with a company in Budapest who actually do rock and roll. And they had these lights and we worked together and programmed it all in. So we had this whole sequence of lighting, different lighting that goes with the different characters that appear on stage, and Elvis had his own spot. So it's a technical challenge. I'd never done it before in such a complicated way. It was great. It was great fun doing it, yeah.